The first thing I noticed was that her hands were shaking when she handed me the second box, even though the morning sun was warm enough to make the sidewalks outside Briarwell College shimmer like glass. She smiled like everything was normal, like she had only called me because the boxes were heavy and the dorm stairs were endless, but I had known Marisol Vance long enough to understand when someone was pretending not to fall apart. Then, after the last suitcase was inside her dorm room, she quietly pushed the door shut, turned the lock, and looked at me with tears already gathering in her eyes. She pressed her back against the door like the whole world was trying to get in, and in a trembling voice, she said she had not called me there to help her move in. She had called me because I was the only person she trusted enough to hear the truth. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet moments that can change someone's life forever, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Lifeline Diaries. Sometimes one act of kindness is all it takes to save a heart that has been suffering in silence. I stood in the middle of that small dorm room with a half-empty roll of packing tape in my hand, surrounded by cardboard boxes, folded blankets, cheap plastic hangers, and the strange new smell of fresh paint and old carpet. Outside, students were laughing in the hallway, parents were giving last-minute advice, and someone's little brother was dragging a laundry basket across the floor like a toy car. It was move-in day, the kind of bright daytime chaos that should have felt hopeful. But inside that room, everything had gone still. Marisol and I had known each other since our senior year of high school, though we were never the kind of friends people expected to stay close. She had been the girl with perfect notes, quiet confidence, and a mother who showed up to every award ceremony looking proud from the front row. I was the guy who worked weekends at a hardware store, drove an old dented pickup, and spent most of my time trying to keep my younger brother out of trouble after our father left. We became friends by accident when she found me sitting behind the gym one afternoon after I had failed a scholarship interview. She did not give me some inspirational speech. She just sat beside me and shared half of her lunch without asking too many questions. That was Marisol. She noticed pain without embarrassing the person carrying it. So when she called me that August morning and asked if I could help her move into college, I said yes before she finished the sentence. She had earned a scholarship to Briarwell, a private college 2 towns over, and everyone had expected her family to make a celebration out of it. But when I arrived at her house, there were no balloons, no proud photos, no mother taking pictures on the porch. Only Marisol standing beside 3 boxes and 1 suitcase, wearing a pale yellow sweater even though it was already hot outside. Her mother's car was in the driveway, but nobody came out to say goodbye. During the drive, she talked too much about ordinary things. The weather. The campus. The fact that she had forgotten to buy shower sandals. Every time silence fell between us, she filled it quickly, as if quiet might force something buried to rise. I noticed the way she kept looking at her phone, not like she was waiting for a message, but like she was afraid one might arrive. Still, I did not push. I had learned from my own broken family that people only open certain doors when they are ready. We carried everything up 3 flights because the elevator line was too long. Her dorm room was small, with 1 narrow bed, 1 wooden desk, 1 closet, and a window facing the courtyard where new students were taking pictures with their parents. Sunlight poured in so brightly that dust floated through the air like tiny pieces of gold. I tried to make jokes about how the room looked like a shoebox with tuition, and she laughed, but it came out thin and tired. When the final box was placed beside the bed, I expected her to thank me and tell me she could handle the rest. Instead, she locked the door. For a moment, I thought maybe she was afraid someone would steal her things. Then I saw her face. Her lips were pressed together, her eyes shining, her shoulders rising and falling like she had been holding her breath for years. She walked to her desk, opened the front pocket of her backpack, and pulled out a folded envelope. It was creased, worn soft at the edges, and held together with a strip of tape. She told me her scholarship was gone. At first, I did not understand. She explained that 3 weeks earlier, her mother had opened a letter from the college saying Marisol still owed a housing balance that had to be paid before classes began. Marisol had believed her scholarship covered everything, but there were fees, deposits, and costs nobody had clearly explained. She had worked all summer at a bakery, saving every dollar, but when she checked her account, most of the money was missing. Her mother had taken it. The words landed heavily between us. Marisol was not angry when she said it. That made it worse. She sounded ashamed, as if someone stealing from her was somehow her fault. Her mother had promised to replace it, then cried, then blamed bills, then told Marisol she was selfish for wanting to leave. The night before move-in, they had fought until sunrise. Her mother said if Marisol walked out, she should not come back. So Marisol packed quietly, called me, and pretended everything was normal because she could not bear to tell anyone else that her dream was already collapsing. That I sat on the edge of her bed, still holding that roll of tape, feeling helpless in a way I hated. I had no wealthy parents to call, no secret savings account, no magic answer. All I had was an old truck, a part-time job, and the memory of every time someone had made me feel small because I needed help. Marisol stood by the desk, wiping tears before they could fall, saying she would figure something out, maybe sleep in the library if housing removed her, maybe defer a semester, maybe go home and apologize even though she had done nothing wrong. That was when something inside me shifted. I could not fix her whole life, but I could refuse to let her face that moment alone. That I told her we were going downstairs, she stared at me like I had misunderstood everything. I told her to bring the envelope, her student ID, and every paper she had. She kept saying there was no point, but I had already opened the door. The hallway noise rushed back in, bright and careless, and for a second she looked terrified of stepping into it. Then she followed me. We walked across campus under the midday sun. Parents passed us with empty boxes and proud smiles. Students held iced coffees and maps. Everything around us looked like a beginning, while Marisol looked like she was walking toward an ending. At the financial aid office, the line curled out the door. She almost turned around twice. I kept standing beside her, not touching her, not pushing too hard, just staying. When we finally sat across from a tired-looking counselor named Mrs. Holloway, Marisol could barely speak. So I helped her organize the papers, not telling her story for her, only giving her room to breathe. Mrs. Holloway listened longer than I expected. She checked the account, frowned, typed, called someone, typed again. Then she explained that Marisol still owed enough to block her housing, but because she was already enrolled and had documented hardship, there might be an emergency student grant. It was not guaranteed. It might take days. But for the first time that morning, there was a door that was not locked. Marisol broke down right there in the office. Not loudly. Just one hand over her mouth, shoulders trembling, years of being strong finally leaking through the cracks. Mrs. Holloway handed her tissues and spoke gently, like she had seen students arrive with dreams packed beside their grief before. She gave Marisol temporary clearance for the dorm through the week and told her to return Monday morning. When we left the office, the courtyard looked different. Not fixed. Not perfect. But possible. Back in her dorm room, we unpacked in silence for a while. I hung her sweaters in the closet. She placed books on the desk, each one carefully, like she was afraid the room might disappear if she moved too fast. Around late afternoon, sunlight softened across the floor. The noise in the hallway settled into the hum of new lives beginning. Marisol sat on the bed with a framed photo in her lap, one of her as a little girl holding a spelling bee trophy while her mother hugged her from behind. She looked at it for a long time, then placed it face down inside a drawer. She told me she loved her mother, and that was what made everything so hard. People think betrayal is simple, that you can hate someone and walk away clean. But sometimes the person who hurts you is also the person who taught you how to tie your shoes, stayed up when you had a fever, and clapped the loudest when you won. Marisol was not just grieving stolen money. She was grieving the version of her mother she had been trying to keep alive in her heart. That I understood that better than I wanted to. My father had not stolen my savings, but he had taken other things when he left. Trust. Peace. The feeling that home was permanent. I told Marisol that loving someone did not mean letting them break every part of you. She looked at me then, really looked, as if she was seeing not the guy with the truck, not the helpful friend, but someone who had also survived a quiet kind of abandonment. Classes began 2 days later. I thought my part in the story was over, but Marisol kept texting me small updates. The emergency grant was approved. She got a campus job at the library. Her roommate, a cheerful nursing student named Tova, brought her soup when she caught a cold. She sent me a photo of her desk one evening, covered in notes and a cheap desk lamp, with the message that she had made it through her first week, but healing is not a straight road. In October, her mother began calling again. Some calls were tearful. Some were cruel. Some were full of apologies that turned into accusations. Marisol would ignore them for days, then answer one and spend the night crying. I visited when I could, usually on bright Sunday afternoons, bringing coffee or fixing a loose shelf or walking with her around campus while leaves scraped along the sidewalks. Slowly, she changed. Not into someone harder, but someone steadier. She learned to say no without explaining herself into exhaustion. She learned that independence could feel lonely before it felt freeing. She learned that asking for help was not weakness. And I learned something too. I had spent years believing kindness meant showing up for everyone else while never needing anyone myself. But Marisol saw through that. She asked about my brother. She asked if I was still saving for night classes. She remembered things I mentioned once and treated them like they mattered. By winter, our friendship had become something neither of us named. It was in the way she saved me a seat at campus events even though I was not a student there. It was in the way I started keeping an extra scarf in my truck because she always forgot hers. It was in the quiet after laughter, when both of us seemed to feel something standing just beyond words. The real turning point came near the end of her first semester. It was a clear daytime afternoon after her final exam, cold but sunny, the kind of day where the sky looks washed clean. Marisol asked me to meet her outside the dorm. When I arrived, she was standing by the same entrance where I had carried her boxes months earlier. In her hands was the envelope her mother had once ruined with fear. Only now, inside it was a printed letter from the dean's office. She had earned a full hardship scholarship renewal and a mentor position for incoming students who faced family or financial crisis. She was crying again, but this time the tears were different. She said she wanted to show me something. We walked upstairs to her dorm room. The room no longer looked temporary. There were warm lights around the window, books stacked in confident piles, a small plant on the desk, and a bulletin board filled with notes, schedules, and one photo of the courtyard in autumn. She closed the door, but this time she did not lock it out of fear. She closed it gently, then turned to me with the softest smile I had ever seen. She said that when she called me to help her move, she thought her life was ending before it began. She thought I would see the truth and pity her. Instead, I stood beside her until she could stand beside herself. She told me I had not saved her, because she had learned to save herself, but I had stayed long enough for her to remember she was worth saving. That I could barely speak. Some moments are too honest for quick answers. I just looked around that little dorm room, remembering the trembling girl by the locked door, and saw the woman she had fought to become. Strong, tender, still healing, but no longer trapped. Before the ending, please comment I believe in second chances if this story touched something deep in your heart. Months later, Marisol became the student other frightened freshmen were sent to when their paperwork failed, when their parents would not support them, when money or shame or fear made them feel like they did not belong. She kept a box of tissues on her desk, snacks in the drawer, and a handwritten note taped where only she could see it. It said, "You are not the worst thing that happened to you." And every year on move-in day, when the campus filled again with bright sun, nervous families, and students carrying their whole lives in cardboard boxes, Marisol stood near the dorm entrance looking for the ones who smiled too hard, spoke too quickly, or carried their fear in silence. Because she knew that sometimes the person asking for help with a suitcase is really asking whether life can still be kind. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Lifeline Diaries. Your support helps stories of kindness, healing, and second chances reach someone who may need them today. Years later, when people asked how Marisol found the courage to begin again, she never talked first about the scholarship, the office, or the letter that saved her housing. She talked about a locked dorm room, a terrible secret, and one ordinary daytime moment when someone chose not to walk away. Because sometimes love does not arrive with grand promises. Sometimes it arrives carrying boxes up 3 flights of stairs, staying through the hardest truth, and reminding a broken heart that the door can open again.